Okay, well, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So I'm just gonna introduce myself and then we'll go over a couple of, logistical items. I'm Mike Keats, I'm the general manager for the Turlock Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And the reason that we're here is because we're proposing to adopt an assessment to help fund our activities. And what we found when we started the outreach workshop process for that is that we started hearing from non-irrigated landowners who we haven't heard from very much. That's very understandable because, if you're not irrigating, if you're not pumping very much groundwater, why would you spend your time going to meetings of an agency that's around managing the groundwater? So we understand that, and so what we wanted to do was have a meeting to provide you with some more information, answer your questions, and to listen to your concerns, because we felt that you had been underrepresented in the planning process that led us to this point. So with that introduction, what I wanted to do was go over a couple of logistical items. First, thanks to me, you will not see any slides behind you today. I won't explain why, but I just do want to make sure that everybody has a handout that has the slides that you would have seen had I brought the slide projector. So what we'll do is we'll try to make the most of this and make this more, interactive and maybe, less around looking at slides and more about talking and listening. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. We have a sign-in sheet. If you've not signed in, maybe before you leave, go ahead and sign in and put your name there. We sent out postcards inviting everybody that was on the GSA's tax rolls as a non-irrigated parcel and inviting them to this meeting. But there was a total of 174 postcards sent out. So if you know of somebody that should have been here or that would like to talk to us or us to listen to them, please let us know or let them know to contact us. We'll provide you with contact info. Actually, there's contact information on the postcard that was sent out. You can reach out to us. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we've listened to and incorporated the concerns of non-irrigated landowners as we move to a vote regarding this success. With that said, what I think I'd like to do is start with some introductions, and then we'll walk through these slides. So, Brian and Sarah, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Good evening, everybody. I'm Ryan Aston, and we're at CI Consulting Group, and we're helping the GSA with funding mechanism implementation.
I'm Sarah Wolf. I'm the general manager for Eastside Water District, which is one of the member agencies of the GSA. And so here on behalf of them.
Welcome. Please go ahead and sign in. Help yourself to some pie, pizza, or decaf. And grab one of the handouts because I didn't bring a slide projector today, so we're going to talk you through the slides. We are recording the meeting. So hopefully everybody's, does anybody object to that? Because what we'd like to do is have it be available for others to listen to that weren't able to be here. Is everybody okay with that? Is anybody not okay with that? Okay, all right. And we have a couple of board members. Samantha, she's GSA staff as well.
Yeah. I'm Savannah, GSA staff.
Yeah. And we have a couple of board members from our GSA board and
Lloyd.
Board.
And Lloyd.
Where's Lloyd?
He just stepped away, I think, but
Okay.
your
Lloyd
supervisor.
here as well. He's a county supervisor. Lacey.
Oh, water.
And Christie?
Hi, I'm Christine McKinnon. I'm the Water Resources Management.
Okay, so, with that, introductions and background is the first thing that we're looking at, each of these pages has 4 slides on it, so we're looking at slide number 2. We'll start with introduction and background, regarding, the Groundwater Sustainability Agency and what we're doing, kind of introducing that and, introducing some of the background and what we're trying to achieve, the benefits and where we think that we're headed. Then we're going to talk about the general approach that we're using to meet the requirements of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and manage the groundwater resources. We'll talk about the proposed Proposition 218 assessment. So that's the assessment or the tax or fee on the properties. And then we'll break for comments and questions. We have a fairly small room here, and really, to be honest, this is your meeting. So if you have any questions or concerns and you want to break in right then, please feel free to do so. If that becomes unmanageable, then we can decide to do it differently. But let's just go ahead and do that so that we have as much interaction as possible. The little funny cartoon on the right here is really to remind me and remind everybody that how you perceive water management just really depends on your particular situation and where you are. And that's why we're here. And the question that we're hearing from non-irrigated landowners is, what the heck? Why would I have a payment stake in managing groundwater that either I'm minimally using, or why would I have a payment stake in managing groundwater in a situation, managing ourselves out of a situation that I did not cause? So those are questions that we're going to try to provide you our best answers to, and then hear what we have to say. So by way of introduction and background, slide number 4, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was passed in late 2014, in recognition during the drought, in recognition of the fact that we were having statewide, sites and other problems that needed to be addressed. So it's a fairly comprehensive regulation, and it required, on the left here first, it required all what are called medium and high priority basins to form groundwater sustainability agencies and begin being managed. And what determines whether you have a medium or high priority basin is that, number one, you have to have groundwater resources that are more than just out of bedrock. So it's a serious water supply. And then how many people are using and relying on that water supply went into a scoring system and identified medium and high priority basins. And we're in a high priority basin. They also divided basins up into critically overdrafted and not critically overdrafted. And the critically overdrafted basins were ones where there was, active harm that was pretty widespread, like subsidence, sites, wells going dry, seawater intrusion, those kinds of things. There were, I think, 22 critically overdrafted basins. Turlock Subbasin is not critically overdrafted, but we are a high priority basin. So the basin is required to comply with SGMA, or the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So each of the GSAs was, or each of the basins was required to prepare and adopt one or more groundwater management plans. Our basin has 2 groundwater sustainability agencies: West Turlock, which is basically the TID service area and some additional area around it, and East Turlock, which is everything east of TID. But we have one groundwater sustainability plan that we adopted and submitted to the state. And that's, we're due to hear back later this month, whether it's been approved or not. And then, number 3 is implementing the groundwater sustainability plans. And the implementation timeline for those is 20 years to reach sustainability. So we submitted our plan in 2022, we started implementing it, we're required to reach sustainability by 2042. So it's a long-term process. And then that's on the right there. The critically overdrafted, we have to reach sustainability by 2040. We're 2 years behind them, so we have to reach sustainability by 2042. What is sustainability? So slide number 5. The sustainable yield definition is the most groundwater, maximum quantity of water that can be withdrawn annually from a groundwater supply without causing what's called an undesirable result. How they came up with the language, I won't go into here, but there are 6 undesirable results that define whether or not they're sustainable or unsustainable. The first is a declining groundwater levels. Are considered an undesirable result. Obviously, I mean, they make as wells go dry, make it more expensive to pump groundwater. Reduction in groundwater storage. So that's a more general way to look at, is the groundwater going to be there when you need it, right? Because people rely more on groundwater during a drought, or you might have a situation where you're currently non-irrigated, but you want to put in a production well. Will the groundwater be there for you when you need it? Seawater intrusion, which thankfully is not a problem for us. Water quality degradation. Sometimes overdrafting can cause contaminants or salts or nutrients to build up in the groundwater. That's not a big problem for us here. Land subsidence. So when you take water out of water clay, you get settlement, those clays will settle, and then the ground surface will settle after it. For our formations here, really that's not probably going to be an issue, but we're still required to look at it. And then surface water depletion. So in our case, both the Tuolumne and the Merced rivers are groundwater connected. And so when you pump groundwater that's a connected system, there's more water either that comes into the groundwater basin from the rivers or less water that's discharged from the groundwater basin to the rivers, depending on whether they're gaining or losing. So there's a balancing there that needs to take place with those surface water rights holders in our area. So the 3 biggest issues for us are the surface water depletion, reduction in groundwater storage, and declining groundwater levels. The map on the right here, the blue is the who we are here. The colorful polygon here is our groundwater sustainability agency. We are a joint powers authority of East Side Water District in blue. Merced Irrigation District has a small service area in green. Yellow is Merced County. Orange is the light orange is Stanislaus County, and then the darker orange, kind of in the southwest here, is Belize Cortez Water District. But even though we have water districts, the only water districts that are getting surface water are Merced Irrigation District, and then there's a number of parcels that receive what's called replenishment water from PID when there's excess water available. Then there's a few riparian diverters, especially on Merced River near Snow. In terms of an overview, what you see here in the lower right-hand corner, yes, sir.
Go back to slide of the line.
Yes.
And I'm gonna pick. Is anybody here that's on staff or that we the people are depending on are familiar with what are done, what's being done in other areas of the country and the world?
Yes. we have familiarity with what's being done in other subbasins, other states, and other parts of the world, and as, you know, so that we don't reinvent the wheel as we're, trying to find solutions. But,
So that would be that each reservoir, not reservoir, we say the groundwater district, each of those it has been determined how much they recharge every year.
no, the question is, as I understand it, hasn't been determined for each groundwater sustainability agency how much they recharge every year. Naturally, and I think the question that you're getting at is, do we know what that sustainable yield is for our area?
Correct.
So we have, it varies from area to area, whether they have a reliable estimate or not. It depends on how much information we have available. At this point, we don't feel we have a super reliable estimate. But the fact that we have down here in the lower right-hand corner of slide number 7, you see these concentric circles. Those are groundwater elevations. And in the middle of and that just basically means that more groundwater is being pumped and it's being replenished. And so the groundwater levels are dropping.
So what you're telling me is that we have no idea how to sustain the water level because we have no clue how much water is going in. And I make that statement based on, I've done a lot of work around the country and around the world. In my project in Nevada, they know how much air, how much recharge is in each district. And you can only pump that volume per year, and actually it's adjusted in relationship to wet years and dry years. So I would make a statement that without knowing that fact, there's impossible to determine the sustainability.
So I'm going to answer that this way. I think it's a jump to say we have no idea. We do have an idea, okay? But it's a very important, the question is, how much information do we have about the sustainable yield to inform our decisions of what sustainability means and what we need to do? Do we have any idea of what it is we really need to do? And so later on in this presentation, I provide more details about that, and I'd be happy to dive into that, to the extent, to talk further to specific folks that are interested in getting more info. We have a groundwater model and we have groundwater monitoring that's done. We have an estimate that our overdraft in the East Turlock Subbasin is about 95,000 acre-feet per year. That's on average. But the only thing that I can tell you for sure about that number is 2 things. One is it's the best number we have at this time. Number 2 is it's wrong. Okay. So as we change the groundwater withdrawal and the groundwater levels begin to recover and gather more data, we will refine that number. We don't want to do more than we need to do. We also don't want to do less than we need to. So our approach is to use an adaptive program where we measure the groundwater levels, we reduce what we're pumping, we increase our recharge, and we see the response, and we adjust every 5 years. So that's our current plan. And I think it's a pretty well thought out plan. I mean, our groundwater sustainability plan, if you've seen it on our website, if you're interested in that, we can point you to it. We can walk you through it so that it's more than just, a doorstop for you, because it's pretty dense. But we're happy to summarize it for you and provide you the information that you need to understand the health of our base.
That this is based on 44 monitoring work, 44. That's all. And notice that the only depression is between the 2 rivers. And notice also how far it is from snow.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty.
So, what happens when you have a cone of depression between 2 rivers is that cone of depression is, in part, the extent of it is going to be determined by how much water you can draw in from the rivers to replenish them. So basically, one of our objectives is to limit that amount to what we defined as a subbasin is sustainable. Yes,
The, how much history do you have? How far do you go back? See from now, back in history, what the water levels were, say 80 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 20 years, so on and so forth. Look back in history to see what has happened in the area, for water. And, area for wells and for irrigation and so on.
right. So we have history in our model that goes all the way back to some parts of our model go all the way back to the 1920s, 1930s. It's pretty sketchy back then. I think we have some pretty good data going back to the 1980s. And then from about 2000, 2003 forward, the data start getting better in the last couple of decades. The reason being that there's more and more data being gathered and more wells being installed over time. And so, as time has passed, and frankly, as the overdraft has gotten worse, there's been more data collected to better understand what we're doing. But so I'm gonna kind of, maybe I'll answer your question, and then what we'll do is, if I can kind of get through our overall approach, I want to make sure that we get to the important questions, which is kind of, folks are wondering why am I having to come here and talk to you about an assessment for groundwater sustainability?
Yeah, the finish with fire, not really. The finish with fire. I noticed there's a big benchmark here on salt water.
Yes.
Are you aware of the CO2 sequestration wells that are going to be going into the area?
I am aware that near the Riverbank Army Depot that there's proposed to be CO2 sequestration there. I really have no specific information about that for you, and it is in our Well, can I stop you on that? Because what I really want to do is I want to make sure that we give everyone a chance to really focus on what we're doing in this subbasin for groundwater sustainability and what we think the benefits are, why we even asked non-irrigated landowners to pay, and then facilitate a discussion as to, well, what do you think about that? Because we haven't had a chance for non-irrigated landowners to really weigh in. I mean, we've had the chance, but it hasn't happened, right? And so this is our opportunity to really hear from those folks, the biggest value. So is that okay? And
No, that's right.
okay.
And then, questions till the end.
Yeah. Okay.
It's your-
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm not trying to shut anybody down. I just really want to steer the conversation so we get the maximum benefit of it. So that's why we're here, is because there's very productive aquifers, but they don't get a lot of natural recharge. And so the water is being taken out at a greater rate than it's being replenished. And so we have this cone of depression that's formed. And so we're going to need to address that under the Sustainable Management Act. And we've set ourselves criteria by which we measure ourselves. We're going to implement that. So we'll get to that in a second. But first, what are the benefits of sustainable groundwater management? I mean, there are people, maybe there's people in this room that believe the concept of sustainable groundwater management is BS. So let me just acknowledge that. I don't think that that's true. I think that it's possible to make BS out of anything, right? I'm well aware of that. But at the core, sustainable groundwater management is managing a resource that we share so that it's there for everybody to be able to use. And so the first thing here is to preserve reliable access to water resources. And so improving the management of groundwater ensures that groundwater is there for the long. I mean, if things continue as they are, groundwater is not going to be available in anywhere near the quantities that it has been available, and not in sufficient quantities to support agribusiness and other business, or for that matter, stock. Reliable irrigation, dairy, poultry, stock, domestic and municipal supply is our goal. Basin-wide data, so gathering this additional data assures that the water supply development. Let me finish and I'll get back to you.
Right, slightly. Yeah. But I was just curious, are you recovering money from the dairies in the concentrated, agricultural feed operations?
Yes, we're proposing that dairies and poultry operations and food processing operations be assessed at an irrigated land rate. And that, domestic users, stock users, all the non-irrigated, all the rangeland be assessed at the non-irrigated rate.
But that's somewhat, odd, because the concentrated feedlot, they don't have much land, yet they might be using much more water.
Well, so we're kind of get ahead of myself here. There are two pieces to the assessment. The first is the piece that we're talking about now, which is a land-based assessment per acre, and it's higher for irrigated than for non-irrigated land. The second piece of it that we'll be talking about early next year is a volume-based extraction. So so folks that are not using de minimis wells, which are considered like domestic wells and stock wells, won't be paying into this, but industrial wells, irrigation wells, other bigger supply wells would be paying a fee based on each acre foot that's extracted. We want to gather data for future groundwater supply development. So part of our role as a GSA is to gather that data so we can determine what's sustainable for everybody and so that we can manage it. And that includes future supply development, right? I mean, you may want to at some point explore putting in a supply well on your property to meet a larger demand. So our data are going to help to make that possible for you. Protecting property values. So if groundwater levels continue to drop, it's going to hurt property values. By the same token, if we make it possible to define sustainable yield so that everybody knows what their groundwater allocation will be, or how much right do they ultimately have, what do they ultimately have a right to pump, that's going to help protect property values for both irrigated and non-irrigated lands. When I say for both irrigated and non-irrigated, I recognize the benefits are obvious and bigger for irrigated land, and that they're smaller for non-irrigated land. Promoting economic stability. So our work is really intended to have an orderly transition,
It's 7 o'clock.
that allows the local economy to continue to operate and flourish. We won't be able to pump as much water for irrigation, but we don't want, an agricultural wasteland to develop either. So we want to gather data and manage our orderly transition. We want to promote community well-being by maintaining access to a reliable water supply for domestic and community use, and have a variety of economic land use choices available that is supported by the available groundwater. And we want to promote the community reputation for sustainable water management. Our goal is to not be the community that's, sort of tarred by the accusation. Well, those people don't care about managing their own more on benefits on slide 9. Promote regulatory certainty. What we're hearing quite a bit is, well, okay, tell us what we need to do. And having more regulatory certainty about helping them to define what is the sustainable yield and how we're going to meet it, and what the requirements are to comply with SIGMA, that's gonna help economically, it's gonna help people with business planning. And also being able to promote that we can do this locally without state intervention. So that locally we can have these kinds of meetings and listen to folks and adjust our approach to meet local needs and to address local sensitivities, right? To be fair and to take the time to do it right. And that kind of goes to state intervention. There's a backstop in Sigma that if we don't manage to do this implemented, the state will come in and they will, at least temporarily, usually at least for a few years, come in and do it for us. And there's a little bit more on what that means later. Yes.
Real quickly, sorry, when you ask a question, could you just state your name and who you're with? That would be real helpful, just so we know. Thanks.
It is part of the standard. And I just want to let you know, the state has no jurisdiction locally. That's their coordination, it's their FLIPA and NEPA, which were passed in 1976, I believe, as a law of the land. They got no jurisdiction, of course, unless you volunteer to let them have jurisdiction. Believe me, I'm not going to volunteer. I want to keep my rights. Thank you.
So I understand the viewpoint. The statement was that the gentleman believes that the state has no jurisdiction to regulate groundwater.
I'm sorry, I know, sir.
Okay.
You said believe I know.
Okay. Well, there are plenty of people that would disagree with you, and the state is actually intervening in several basins. And you know, I think that's a fact. And the fact is that they believe it, and they have the attorneys to back it up. They have more attorneys than we do, unfortunately. So, you know, when I talk about Sigma compliance, let's just take that as a baseline. We can agree, disagree as to whether or not the state has the authority to do what they say they're going to do. They believe they have the authority. And so that's going to be sort of the theory that we're operating under for this presentation, okay? Avoiding environmental impacts. So there's environmental impacts that are associated with dropping groundwater levels near the rivers or at wetlands or interconnected streams. You know, riparian trees riparian hardwoods could be stressed and could die. So, you know, so there's environmental issues that we're trying to avoid, and not having those in our area helps us to avoid regulatory scrutiny. And also opens up the opportunity for more funding to come in for environmental purposes that also helps us in other ways. And then lastly, promoting water supply and economic resilience. So sustainable management provides improved ability to adapt to changing conditions. Groundwater is going to be there when we need it during drought, reducing the financial impact, unexpected challenges, and then locally driven. Sigma gives us an opportunity to locally drive sustainability and apportionment of groundwater, management of groundwater, and avoid a legal or adjudication pathway, which is less efficient. So it provides us a way to do that. Now, let me step back and say something here just real quick. I realize that this is my sales pitch right now, okay? When I get done with this, we're going to go into the information. So please, you know, forgive me for being a little bit salesy, but that's my pitch to you right now. And so the benefits are why we believe that we have non-irrigated landowners here, because those benefits we think accrue to you as well as to others. And to me, probably the main question is, what did we value that benefit right? So that, you know, to me, that's the question. It may not be the question to you, so we need to hear you out on that. Intervention. So under Sigma, BWR can refer a basin to State Water Resources Control Board for intervention if the GSP is found by BWR to be inadequate, or the GSP is being inadequately implemented if we're not meeting our goals. And what happens then is local input becomes more limited. It's pretty severely limited. Groundwater users would be required to register their wells. install meters, and report extractions to the state. We would need to address their identified, the deficiencies in our groundwater sustainability plan or its implementation. There would be a $300 per well registration fee and a $100 fee for all wells, for de minimis wells. So the $300 fee would be for larger supply wells. So the de minimis wells is less than 2 acre feet per year. So that's mainly domestic wells, but some, some stock wells would fall into that category. There would be a groundwater extraction fee of $40 to $55 per acre foot, depending on what the state feels they have to do in terms of developing their own planning for the basin. And then there'd be potential pumping regulation and overdraft penalty. So one of our goals is to steer clear of that state intervention scenario. It's a state. So the lower left-hand slide shows where we are in terms of state intervention versus SGMA compliance. Under SGMA compliance, we have costs for GSA administration, and that's what we're here to discuss today. And then we have costs for projects and management actions. Under state intervention, we might have to do different work for administration and projects and management actions, but we would have the additional costs of well registration. So we have probably about 1,600 to 1,700 wells in our part of the subbasin, so it's about $500,000. And then extraction fees, which we're currently at about 240, 250,000 acre feet per year. So that's roughly $10 million. And that money goes to the state. It's buyback. Okay, that doesn't benefit us at that point. And we have continued expenses because they want us to become compliant. So, what's our approach to stay away from that? Sarah, do you want to take over for a little while? So these folks can hear somebody else talk about this. I'm sorry, you're going to introduce yourself. Oh, I'm Mike Teaser, TIE with, and I'm the general manager for East Turlock Subbasin groundwater sustainability. Okay. So you're a government employee? I'm a contract employee. So I'm not full-time, I'm a consultant and.
Warren Burrows, how you doing? We, our board hired him. And he's the executive director, basically, of this of the agency. Basically, government agent. So he's a government employee, he's a government agent.
No, I'm not a government agent, but, well, I mean.
Are you working, are you gonna get paid by the government?
No.
You're gonna take taxpayers' money, Jim. That's a government employee. He said it's the local government, that's for it, that's okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
So basically what happened is I was recruited by the board to help manage the groundwater sustainability plan. And,
Do you want to just
my
advance this
goal
as they go, just so
is
it's the
to
same
pay,
exam when we
by the hour for my service.
So I can give you just on the pad that.
Yes, that's right. And, that's, I mean, if you want to look into the details, those details are available. We're happy.
And I'm Sarah Wolf, and I work for Eastside Water District, also as a contractor. And Eastside Water District is the local water agency for one of the members within the GSA. So I'm just going to go through kind of our plan of how we're going to implement and reach sustainability. This is the plan we have laid out at this moment in time in our GSP. And I think in reference to one of the comments made earlier, the data is not complete at this point in time of what we know of what's going on in the basin. So these are our projections. This is how we plan to do it. This will be altered as we learn more. We will do more projects, less projects based on how the subbasin is responding and what we learn about the area. If it rains like it did last year for the next 10 years, we're going to be in pretty good shape. It may not rain like it did last year for the next 10 years. So we will have to adjust to adapt to whatever the situation is and what the data is that we're getting back on how the wells are responding and the recharge is occurring. So I think, this is the best information we have at this moment in time. And that's what we're trying to build a plan upon. And so we will implement and, we'll be adaptive as we learn more information. So that's what this first slide is depicting, is just kind of on slide 13. Just so you know, just that things will change and ebb and flow, and we're hoping that we're implementing enough projects that bring our groundwater levels up, and we can keep pumping at some level and continue farming at a large acreage that we have today, somewhere close to that. But it's all going to depend on what type of projects we do. And if we can't implement projects at a scale that offsets the pumping we're doing, then we have to decrease the pumping and reduce the agricultural production. So that's the adaptive management. We'll meet these sustainability goals through a number of knobs that we can turn. We're very limited, obviously. We have projects that we have to build. We have to acquire water to go into those projects. Those things have to be available. They're not readily out there and available, but that's one of our main objectives is to increase the water supply, surface supply through projects into this area. So we're not impacted by reduced pumping as much. We will also do things like management actions such as reducing pumping through land fallowing, or we've recently received a grant for $8.8 million to do multi-benefit projects, which will be projects that are coupled with land fallowing, habitat restoration, drinking water mitigation. We will incorporate all of those into that grant to find ways to reduce demand on our groundwater pumping. And one of the programs that we've championed is for almond farmers that have almonds that are coming of age and are going to be pulled out. We will pay that almond farmer to not replant for a period of 3 years. And so that land will lay fallow for those 3 years, reducing our overall demand in the basin. So that's one example of a project through the multi-benefit land repurposing program that we will be implementing. And then finally, we'll have, unfortunately, this all costs time and money to implement. So there's an operations component to this. There are people like all of us here that have to, on your behalf, make this all happen. We have to write the plan, submit the plan, report the plan, and make sure that we are monitoring what everybody's doing and reporting that. So all of that is the operations of that. And so I think the next slide 15 is very similar to what I've just laid out. The operations and compliance, we're going to be doing a lot of data collection of how much groundwater we're actually pumping. I think you all know in this area, there's not a lot of data being collected on the wells that are in existence today. Most people just pump, don't have meters on them, definitely aren't reporting that use anywhere. They will be in the future. We're going to implement evapotranspiration monitoring. That's how we're going to monitor the wells in the area, through a program called Land IQ. And that is what irrigators who are using groundwater will use to calculate how much water is being utilized on their farms. So we have contracted with that company already, and that is starting. The monitoring is already begun, and it will be rolled out this year in 2024. As a way for growers to start viewing and interacting with the amount of water that that is being reported as used on their behalf. And then in 2025, we intend to roll out an allocation of what landowners will be able to pump. So that is part of our data collection and analysis and monitoring. And as we see things, somebody mentioned how many monitoring wells we have. We intend to increase the amount of monitoring wells over time as needed in areas of focus that we really need to be looking at. How the rivers are reacting to our changes are one of the key areas that we need to focus on, because we can't continue to draw the water from subsurface from those rivers into the Kona Depression. Because those of you that are along the river, it's negatively impacting you. So we will be monitoring and taking responsive actions if we're seeing those numbers change. Again, I mentioned the compliance and reporting. It is, as somebody mentioned, government employees. We have annual reports we have to turn in, 5-year reports that we have to basically summarize everything that we've learned in the last 5 years and what we've done about it. And there's a lot of collection of information and sharing of information with Department of Water Resources that's required through this program. Projects that we have, in lieu recharge projects. I think you may have seen a lot of these occurring this year in 2023. Many landowners took water where they could off the Highline Canal from Turlock Irrigation District and put them into recharge or in lieu projects where they were taking that surface water and instead of using a groundwater well where they would have historically, they use the surface water. We are encouraging and trying to expand those types of projects. We also had a lot of recharge basins built where people were recharging in the area. So those are many of those we'll hope to expand into the future. As I said, direct recharge projects, dispersed recharge, land repurposing. I mentioned that earlier, that if we do some land fallowing or we are going to try to find areas where in the swales of properties where you have poor production because it's always waterlogged or it's at the top of the hill and it doesn't irrigate properly, helping support landowners take those particular locations out of production to help reduce our demand. And then pumping management, I think individual landowners knowing more accurately how much they're actually using will help them better manage their water supply. And then slide 16 is just a picture of what it's a chart of adaptive management. You can see in the first 5 years, which is the first section to the left there before the dotted line. The blue is our sustainable yield as we know it today. The red is what we are overpumping, what we believe to be overpumping. And as you go across the bars, those are years. Each one of those is years, and they're broken up into 5-year increments because that's what we have to do. Summary reports is at the end of every 5 years and assess where we are. The different colored light red and light blue that start to phase in are demand reduction and new projects with water supply associated with them. So as we increase new water supply and demand reduction, the red area that we are overpumping continues to go down over time to a point that hopefully we get to the end of 2042 where we're in balance. We are pumping a sustainable amount. We have projects to support an additional amount of pumping, and then we have had some demand reduction that gets us to that sustainable level. So that is our goal. Okay, so did I turn the right page? No. Okay, 17 is a similar picture of, but in a different format. The red, this is, how we're pumping today. And so the top line is where we are right now. We're over pumping by, I can't see that number. I think that number is
95,701.
95,000 plus acre feet of over pumping that we have in this basin right now. And so to reduce that, we'll be incorporating these projects and changes that I've been talking about to hopefully get down to the bottom line where it's all in the greens and blues and we are pumping at a sustainable level and we have projects to support that. So the 95,000 is a big number. It's a big number of over pumping that we're going to have to work through over the next 20 years. So there will be a lot of changes in how we do things. And I think for everyone involved, whether you're pumping or not, you're in a subbasin and we have to find compliance somehow, and if we don't, none of us are going to be able to even sustain the domestic wells and even the non-irrigation pumping that we currently do. So it's critically important that we get a handle on this and start working through solutions. So the rules and regulations, I'm not sure I can see this slide. Sure, yeah, you go ahead. Yeah, because you're gonna be implementing the rules and regulations, or not implementing, developing them.
And it might be sufficient just to say that we're gonna have to adopt rules and regulations for pumping. And by rules and regulations, we mean rules for our cell as well as, rules for reporting. So things like, well,
No, I think that's good.
the framework that we set up for measuring groundwater pumping for, large groundwater pumpers, for like irrigation pumpers. How we measure groundwater pumping and how we're gonna handle that data, how we account for that data. Our tracking methods and reporting credits, if you don't use the full allowance, are you allowed to pool those credits with other parcels? Are you allowed to trade those credits or trade them for sale? What are the rules around that? And then the enforcement mechanisms, and importantly, appeals. If we don't get something right, what's the process for people bringing that to our attention and for us getting it corrected?
And I think that's an important component for this group in particular, in that I don't think we know yet at this point in time, as we said, exactly what a sustainable yield number is for this subbasin. We have a general idea, but that's going to be refined over time. And what that means for those of you that are not currently pumping, maybe never will pump, but maybe will. Maybe some have intention or ability to pump. How we define what that sustainable yield is important to all of us, whether we're currently farming, intend to farm, or never plan on doing any farming on our property. The development of that sustainable yield impacts your property value. And so you're engaged in this process, I think, is critically important. And that's a component of why it's important to engage with the GSA. And so I just want to add that is something, regardless of what you're doing on your property today, it will impact you going forward into the future, because whatever rules and regulations we put in place will carry to all lanes.
But it really is all about location. If you're looking at this map, it's all about location. Snelling is really on the edge of the GSA.
I agree, but you're still in the GSA. And so,
But if we're as far away from your point of depression as possible.
I don't disagree with any of that. And I think that will have, an impact as to how the GSA engages with you as far as what your water allocation sustainability interaction is with respect to groundwater. It will have an impact on that, but you have to be engaged with the GSA to ensure that your property is recognized as being so far away and has different components that are of value to it and not hindering tone of depression, not impacting.
And I'm just curious, and everybody in this room, I'm sure is curious, how much regulation do you have? Let's say a big landowner nearby puts in, has the right and is recently plant thousands of acres of orchard. And that is within 20 miles or 15 miles or even maybe 10 miles of this community of selling. And they may not have felt the impact of their drafting, but they might feel, because most of the wells here in Snelling are very shallow wells, right? 20, maybe 30 feet deep, right? Right? What's ours, everybody's thinking, right? Maybe 50 feet deep. 80, right? A lot of them are very shallow wells, but these
data, to set that baseline. We don't have that kind of data for meters, but we do want to give people the option to use meters, because if you have a meter, then, and generally, we think that you know, the landowner, the grower, the land operator is the one that knows the most about what they're using. So some may prefer to use meters, and we give that option.
I have a question, Dan Richards. This is still not getting to why my land is protected by an easement. You'll never be able to put trees on it. Why am I supposed to pay for the people that have trees? That's what I'm.
So let me just lay out kind of the premise or an explanation, real quickly, because, and what
I didn't hear what you were asking.
I have land north of here that is in an easement, totally protected. You will not be able to, no matter what generation it is, plant trees or anything like that. It is totally protected, reserved. Why am I supposed to be paying for someone who is pumping water somewhere else when I am not? That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, and I think, two things. One, just by way of process check. We don't want to go so far into the details, on the explanation of what we're doing, that we lose the time for these kinds of questions. So I think this is why you're here. And Ryan has a presentation regarding the Prop 218, just by way of process check. I asked him to, when I went over and whispered in his ear earlier, I said, look, I think what we need to do is probably just tell them what the irrigated rate is and what the non-irrigated rate is, and then first hear your reactions. I mean, we can tell you a little bit about the background, about how we got there, but there's a lot of different factors in engineering analysis and so forth. So I want to answer your question. There's another question coming up here as well. Yes.
My name is Susan Zanger. I just wonder if we could step back a bit.
Yes.
And you could say really what the purpose of tonight's meeting is. I think that's what's causing a bit of confusion by some of us. You know, obviously there's quite a few people that understand Sigma and the process, and certainly you all do, and I want to thank you for being here. But it's difficult to go through a slide presentation that would be really quick if we could see it. Because a lot of these details, we can't even read. We can't even, so I feel like we're sitting here tonight wanting to engage and be a part of the process, at least our family and I'm sure others, in a positive way, respecting your roles and what you're trying to do on our behalf. So we need to have the data to understand. And I feel like we're not, our family, most people, we've got neophytes in terms of government regulations. We understand them. But I think we're sitting here over an hour into a meeting, not understanding the basic fundamentals of the data that you're giving us to present. We can't read them, we can't see them. And so we don't understand. You know, so it might have been good to have, like, tell us why we're here. This is a Prop 218 hearing.
No.
I know that, but what you're just telling us, here's our rates. But you're not explaining to people what goes into formulating the rates in a 218 hearing, the engineer's estimate, how we might look at that, a little bit about the agency, how the people, what's the budget, and I think all of that would be helpful to understanding how these assessments were derived. I just don't think we're going to get it from the
slides.
I know you're here and I don't know why there's not, but we're not. We're trying, but it's really difficult to follow and understand what we're supposed to be able to understand and engage in a meaningful way with you.
So a couple of things on that. So what I heard, and I'm just repeating this for the sake of the recording, but what I heard is a number of things. One is we evidently didn't clearly enough articulate the purpose of the meeting. The second is an expression of some frustration that people are coming here in goodwill to engage, and we're giving them a printout that you might need reading glasses to really be able to read, and that's on me. The projectors at the other hall that we usually do that showed up today without that, so I take responsibility for that. So I think that what we want to do, our purpose here is to engage with the non-irrigated landowners specifically, or if you're irrigated and you happen to show up here because you're interested, we want to engage with you, and we want to make sure that we give you the information that you need in order to understand this Prop 218 assessment. What's happening with the Prop 218 assessment is we had a workshop on December 14th, I think it was. And at that workshop, what we found was that we were hearing for the first time in our workshops from non-irrigated landowners. And the night before, I had gone to a workshop on the east side of the GSA where I had spoken at some length to a cattle rancher that was very frustrated. And so the reason that we're here is because our perception was that non-irrigated landowners had not been engaged with sufficiently for us to make a public decision about how much to charge going into a Prop 218 tax, okay? And we had justification, we had reasons, we had engineering backup and an engineering report for that supported the landowner assessment for irrigated land by the acre and non-irrigated land by the acre. What I would and that was gone through at the workshop, and what we wanted to accomplish specifically here was to hear more from the non-irrigated landowner, because the message that we were getting from them was that we don't understand how we benefit from the GSA existence. People are kind of around the spectrum on that. Some feel like we understand why you need to exist, but we don't understand the benefit. And others are more along the lines of, yeah, you're a government employee and you're here to help. I'd rather that you didn't come to my life. I get that. So what?
On high level, what we think is relevant from the rest of the slide deck, so we can just. Oh, sorry, I'm just saying, you're just strategize about what we think is relevant, maybe to summarize out of here to get to your main questions, and so maybe now's a good time to transition and. Want to take up the whole meeting, listening to your presentation.
Yep.
Yeah, so Brian.
So I think we have a good plan to just talk about what we're here for, and then explain to you how we got there, and then have some interaction.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me just suggest also that, if folks want more information and an actual modified slide deck to look at, an explanation of the basis for the, more in-depth explanation for the basis of what we're doing and what we're assessing, we will make that happen. Okay.
But you still,
I just still don't understand when we have worked so hard to keep our property protected here in the livestock business. And we do not pump water, we do not put trees on it, nothing. And I understand the trees. I've lived here all my life. I've seen ground that was cattle ground come this way in nothing but trees. So we went ahead and protected our land from being able to do that. People being able to, generations, this goes in forever. And that's why I don't understand why I am being asked to pay for people that are pumping water that I am not using and I am not pumping. And it will never be done on my property. We have devalued our property through putting it into an easement. Because once you do that, you know you can't farm, ground, do anything to it. So why am I being asked to pay for someone who is doing it? And I'm not trying to be upset with someone who is, as trees, that's their thing. But my question is, why are we being asked to participate in paying for something that is going to benefit to us?
No, I think, I mean, you raise a very good point. It's completely valid. It's why we're here. Because you all are being asked to participate in a program that for the most part, you did not contribute to the problem of.
Nope.
So we recognize that, but the problem is you were put in the boundaries of the GSA.
Yes, I understand that, but it,
Well, no, what,
Yeah.
I think you do have to pay no matter what, but what we're trying to find is a balance of what is the appropriate amount, so it's as minimal as possible,
I just don't.
so that we're in
consider that
compliance.
fair.
I think that there's a lot of people that, okay, if you have rocks, rock pile, how are you gonna assess rock pile, right?
True.
But it's never gonna be agricultural land.
I see your point in land that has trees, has all of that done to it. But why are we being taken into this when we have already protected our land from that? And we're being asked to pay for what other people have done. That's my question here.
Well, I don't have a good answer for you.
Okay, see.
It's, I mean,
That-
you are
that's
in the
what
boundaries.
I want this answer to be put to a state water board. Say, why are we including people that will never have trees, never irrigate?
Yeah.
Why am I being penalized to pay for that?
The quick answer is that our de facto municipal corporation governments are inept, and we always pay, people always pay.
Yes, and that's why we are here, because we are landowners of non-irrigated. And why are we being forced to pay?
The other DSAs have eliminated random.
I was gonna say.
Not eliminated. They haven't eliminated them. They have a much smaller assessment. Most areas still, all areas I'm aware of, non-irrigated lands still pay an assessment. It's much, much smaller. And likewise, ours is much, much smaller. But, you know, I recognize it's probably still not small enough.
Not small enough.
And so, I mean, that's why we're here, is to talk about that.
We shouldn't be putting the bill for bigger corporations. That's number one. And it's not as though we're gonna ever sell the land. I mean, that's what we're saying.
And
Yeah,
I get it. I completely get it.
That's my point. That's why.
That's what we're trying to do, is modify their rules.
Okay, I mean, that's why we're here too.
That's
So
why I'm asking you, is there a modification for me?
we're here to see if there's something different we can do. And so we're gonna walk through. I think supervisor has something to say first, but in a moment, Ryan is our engineer on the 218, and he's gonna walk through how he got to these numbers. And so, I mean, just listen to the methodology, and then we can talk further about,
Understand all that.
Okay. Did you want to say something, Lloyd?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that part of the 218 has an includes process. And so, you know, but it's hoping that we get to a spot, but, anyway, you
know, so for those of you who don't think what's happening is fair, this process. And the, you know, the other thing that I will say is that your state legislatures put you in this, right? It wasn't us locally. What we're trying to do locally is protect the state from coming in, because this $2.55 fee for non-irrigated lands will probably be $11 an acre or more if the state comes in. So it's, you know, maybe the lesser of two evils, and it may be where there's a deal and you're out. So we're doing the best we can. But we got to get through the information because it's so clear that we're in the situation of a few of you, so we want to get to their questions.
I fully understand what you're saying, but what I don't get is why aren't you dividing it into who is using it and who isn't using
I think that's a great transition to go into the.
it?
Yeah.
Let's find out why.
And in the interest of time and touching on the things that really give you a sense of how we got to where we are with the preliminary rates. I want to skip ahead to slide 22. I'll see if you can see it. And again, I apologize that it's small.
Right.
Yeah. But on slide 22, you will see a little diagram. And that diagram gives you a sense financially how we kind of organize this assessment, kind of in a larger context. So you'll see on the top left, there's a box that says operational budget. So that includes a lot of the stuff that Mike was talking about earlier related to administration, operations, and Sigma compliance. So that portion of the budget is feeding into the land-based benefit assessment that we're here to talk about tonight. On the bottom left of that same slide, you see the PNMA budget, that stands for Projects and Management Actions. And that includes things like direct recharge, blue recharge, groundwater recharge projects described in the GSA. So while the top feeds into a land-based benefit assessment, that's a charge per acre with varied rates for irrigated and non-irrigated, that bottom is envisioned as something that will be charged proportional to groundwater use. So if you're not using any, you would not pay anything under that. That is still being developed. We don't have a ton of information about that right now, but this is kind of how we envision this, these kind of two parts of the budget feeding into these two different measures. So while I do realize your concerns, that's a part that you would not be paying into. I think it's kind of a conceptual where we are now with that. Let's see. I think next I want to talk briefly about Proposition 218 benefit assessment. This is a fairly unique and specific funding mechanism. It has its own kind of procedural requirements. Those were set forth by the passage of Prop 218, which was passed by voters in 1996. Essentially, the way this works is that these are conducted with an all-mail property owner ballot. And so this is something where you will receive a ballot in the mail from the GSA. On that ballot, it'll have your proposed assessment amounts listed next to your parcel number or parcel numbers and a total there for you. And essentially, this is because this is based on that assessment amount, it's a weighted ballot. So your assessment amount would be sort of your voting power. It can be thought of as $1 equals 1 vote. It's kind of how that works. Let's see. Go ahead and skip forward to the next slide, 25, if you turn the page. So once ballots have been mailed, there will be a 60-day balloting period. The law requires 45 days, but we've decided to go with the 60 to make sure people have a chance to get those ballots returned. At the close of this voting period, there will be a public hearing and a tabulation of those ballots. During that voting period, if a replacement ballot is needed for any reason, let's say it gets lost in the mail, doesn't get to you, or if you get it, accidentally throw it away, you don't realize what it is, or any other reason, if you've been miscategorized according to the methodology, you can reach out to the GSA and we can provide a replacement ballot. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
When are we done?
They'll be mailing at the end of this month. We don't have an exact day yet, but it'll be towards the end of January.
So they've already been.
No, they have not. We will be voting on this assessment at the end of the month at the GSA board meeting, the end of January. If the board approves it at the end of January, the ballots will go out after that. I believe our board meeting date is January 25th.
So, but for everybody who doesn't know, you can get a copy of the Prop 218 report, so you can read all of all of it, everything that is in your engineering report, that form the basis of how you came up with these amounts. And
Exactly.
everyone has the ability to submit something in writing or to offer verbal testimony on the Prop 218 hearing of why they believe this may not be appropriate. So you would have the opportunity to put there here tonight or here tonight, so we understand what that timeline was, because I thought this showed that it might have happened in December, but it didn't. Correct.
Oh, sorry. were you-
No, I was just gonna say that there still is time to read the full engineer's report and to offer input about.
Caitlin's our general counsel and she, I think, wants to.
Thank you for clarifying that the board would be, accepting the engineer's report or considering whether to accept the engineer's report at the board meeting at the end of this month. So they're not accepting or approving any sort of rate at this point. So there's still time that the engineer's report is still in draft form. So they'll be discussing that and getting that Thursday, the 25th.
25th.
And then that's, at that point, if the board accepts the engineer's report, that's when they would give staff direction to mail these ballots out. So that's what would start the 60-day process.
The other, the timeline of when the final report would be available for
So-
review.
Yeah, so if the board does accept that engineer's report at that meeting, it would then be made available shortly after that.
So the public can't see it before January 25th.
So we have introduced material on this at board meetings all along the way. And so we do have previous board meeting slides and minutes that detail kind of this development process of that methodology from the engineer.
And,
But
I would just add too, that we are having this meeting because we can still change the approach.
Well, but if you put in, if in order to have a ballot opportunity, if the public needs to be able to review that in advance up to January 25th. Otherwise, you come to the meeting, you haven't seen the report, you wouldn't be able to offer appropriate and informed input. So I'm not sure that that would be a valid way to proceed and would satisfy the requirements of the 218. If we don't, if the public can't even see that before the board members see it.
So I want to try to clarify, and I may have misunderstood, but earlier you had mentioned people having an opportunity to submit something in writing. So that's related to what's called a property related fee, when you have an opportunity to submit written protests. This is a slightly different funding mechanism. It's kind of the cousin of the property related. You actually are going to have a ballot that you can check yes or no. And the tabulation of those won't happen until 60 days after the January 25th meeting. So there will be all that time to review the engineer's report, come back to the tabulation and provide further feedback.
I understand it, my was more of a comment, that if we want to be working collaboratively together, because we're all on the same team, because we accept the premise that we're better to govern ourselves locally than to have state involvement, it would be better to have people see that information up front before it's just adopted, and then their only recourse at that point is to vote that. Because then they may have voted, they're just saying to get the win-win for everybody.
I understand. Yeah, thank you.
Mike answer. I read what the legislature said to me about this, and I think that the non-irrigated people that are here tonight, we do not want the state to be in control of it, because once the state takes over, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's a horror. So our ballot then is going to be determined whether the state takes control, or if we have our group take control of it and do the assessments and charge us $2.56 per acre or not. So I think that everybody that's not here needs to know that too, so that when they get a ballot to vote and they go, oh, I don't want this, I don't want this, well, it's gonna go right to the state. So we need to make sure that people that aren't here, or even some of the people that are here, know that, we need a group rather than the state, But we also need to group people to do proper assessments for people that aren't using very much water or none. And the people that are using moderate or more water. And the last thing I'll say is that a lot of this is totally dependent on our rain. I mean, we go through a drought for 4 or 5 years, and all of a sudden we have rain like, that's flooding. So, I mean, so that's, we have no control over that. So, I mean, you can only control rain so much. You can control it at all. Right. Either there or it's not. Even the weatherman. I guess, that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I have a question on the ballot counting.
Yes.
And this is being recorded.
The meeting is being recorded.
No.
Are the ballots that are not going to be returned, are those going to be considered tacit agreement?
So the way that balloting works is it requires 50% plus one, they call it, so a simple majority of the returned ballots. Returned ballots, yeah.
Okay,
So ballots
the
not,
ballots that are not returned are not considered a tacit agreement, correct?
they're not considered yes or no, they're not in that.
Okay, so then the information that we receive will have total ballots sent, total ballots received, and then a lawful counting of those received ballots as a yes or no, 50%, 51%.
Yes,
Which is violated democracy, which is the law rule. We're not a democracy, we're a representative.
right. And one other point about that, as I mentioned earlier, it's a weighted balloting as well. So it's not a simple number of this many yeses, this many nos. It's by assessment amount. So someone with a higher assessment has more voting power. As I said earlier, it can be thought of as $1 equals 1 vote. So the way that'll be processed or calculated will people consider assessment amount.
Which is not based on the Constitution, because the Constitution, the way that would be done, is you're right, you have representation per acre per dollar, but then each property should have one vote, section percent. That would be possible, because then you would have representation. What you're talking about is democracy, which law rule, 50% plus one.
Property rights, the guy half an acre, the guy 1,000 acres, the other half acre, 1,000 acres, whatever. I think it's really about property, right? It's really property. What you can or cannot do with no property.
I absolutely hear your point, and I get that, and that's how some of these things work, such as the property related fee I mentioned earlier. When the Howard Jarvis Factory Association wrote the property, I think the way they saw assessments going, they wanted to be weighted by people who have more of a stake, have more gain or lose by a pastime. I understand it going through that, I think historically that was kind of the way they thought about it. They were like,
Why was the decision made not to, the question that she asked, why not to the dairies? Why not assess them now at a higher rate? I think you said maybe that's.
They actually are being assessed.
2025.
So,
Or did I mishear that?
yeah, so they are being assessed, dairies, food processing, they are being assessed at the irrigated rate.
Right, but the concentrate, that was up later. Why
So-
not?
So that's that second part, right, that fee based on groundwater use, on non-venomous wells, water production wells. That's kind of the second component of this, that's gonna fund the project. That's something that somebody not irrigating would pay at all, and somebody irrigating a lot would pay a lot. So proportional to groundwater use.
And let me just back up to, so, a concentrated animal feeding operation would have a use code that would be designated as irrigated on our tax.
So they will pay that $17 plus per acre of land that they sit on and own. And then when we impose a pumping amount and we charge for that pumping, then they will pay for their use.
I think I'm more concerned, not with the dairies, because the dairies do have generally in this area, dairies generally acres surrounding the pastures, and a lot of them are organic, you know, pastures and alfalfa. But the turkey ranches, they have very small land.
Mhm.
They may still have large water. They're the ones that are gonna be needing, leaders. And they're not gonna be subjective to satellites, because.
It's a good point. Yeah.
So so for our measurement, satellites would be used for people who are growing crops. And there's other measurement techniques and calculations that you can make for dairies and for poultry operations and other, you know, non-farming operations. So yeah, that's being considered.
If we all vote no, and this goes to the state.
No, so let me clarify, and I appreciate your comments, sir, but I did want to clarify that that's not a direct result. If this doesn't pass, the state doesn't notice to come in and take over. What we're looking at is if there are deficiencies in our plan, or if there are deficiencies in the way we're implementing our plan, the state would take over. What we see as a potential outcome of this not passing is us not having the funding to achieve those goals. So indirectly, that could be a consequence that we're looking at, that we're taking seriously, but not as a direct result of this ballot.
And
Yeah,
I
mean,
just want
we're
to,
not gonna throw up our hands if it doesn't pass, and say, let the state take over. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a hard look at, okay, how can we do this differently and fund ourselves? We've really tried to achieve, something that's economical and something that's fair. But we want to hear from you what your views are and consider those in that calculus.
and I'd just like to let you know that you're all being assessed today, I believe at 96 cents an acre, I think for non-irrigated. I think I have that. No, your current assessment for the GSA, the existing one, I think is at 96 cents.
I think it's 96 or 98.
Yes, for the last 2 years. Yeah. So this would be, note that we would get rid of that. This would be new.
Let me touch on that.
It would be more, but I would like to just say we are collecting today for the GSA does not cover operations. Eastside Water District has funded for the last 2 years alone to the GSA to keep them up and operational. So that is in large part why we're doing this 218 overall, is just operationally, we aren't covering the budget today with the assessment we have in place.
Well, now, so the $2.56 per acre would be added or the additional to what we're.
So let me.
No, it would be replacing, yes.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's right where I wanted to go. There are two existing charges. One's a fee, one's a settlement. They're both charges. One is within the GSA outside of Eastside Water District, and the other is within Eastside Water District. So the way this would work, if this proposed assessment is passed, the GSA fee would go away, and this would replace it. And the Eastside Water District assessment would continue until it expires in 2025. And those property owners would not be charged this new assessment directly. EWD would pay this new one on their behalf. When that current EWD assessment expires in 2025, folks would then switch over to this new one. And so they're being included in the balloting just as everyone else is. But that's kind of a different dynamic.
Okay, so if this was implemented, the non-irrigated was $2.56 per acre per year. And when it ended, you know, it wouldn't keep increasing. It might go down some, it might go up. It depends on, you know.
Yeah.
I know that very seldom taxes never go down.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's gonna probably go, but it's gotta be in relation to the weather.
Well, and to the success of the GSP. If we're implementing projects, if we're, you know, our hope is that we have the ability to buy some surface water from neighboring water districts, and we're able to bring supply into the area that augments the demand that we have.
Will we have input again in the future after that?
anytime there's a new 218, there's required public input. Just like right now. Well, I mean, I think Mike made it clear in the beginning. The large reason we wanted to have this meeting was because at the December 14th meeting, that was the first time we had any engagement with this particular community. And I know the counties have had meetings in the past as Sigma was being developed. And it's been, I think, we know this as, you know, the irrigated lands and Eastside Water District, we don't get people to engage until we start talking about money. And so once we started putting money out there as to what these charges were, I think that brought a lot more people. That workshop was the best attended workshop I participated in. Tonight is a wonderful attendance, but this is the first time this process, it's been going on now for the last 6 months that we've been working through this at the board level. This is, you know, these are the first meetings that we've been able to have over the last 2 months that are public, well-attended. And so I think that the meetings have been available, but getting a flyer that says you're gonna get $250 charged to you an acre, it brought a lot more people out, which was helpful. No, because we have been trying to contact people through.
No, I mean, cheapest, what we're gonna charge you, private ground.
I farm in a couple of different districts and I've been very involved in Sigma, and unfortunately, this is the reality of the San Joaquin Valley. And so I didn't feel sheepish about it. I'm not happy that we have to charge these things. I don't feel good that we're all assessed these charges, but it is the reality of farming right now.
No matter what.
Correct.
Yeah, but there's no money coming in, that's the problem. You're farming, you're gonna stand it, it's a balance of the budget. But if there's no money coming in, balance that budget, really.
Well, I have plenty of land also that's not being farmed and I'm paying assessments on it, so I get a little of both.
I think we've been waiting patiently.
Yeah, sorry.
I appreciate you coming and providing us information. It's a little frustrating, that ground that has been said, it's not contributing to the overdraft that we don't have in our basin, is going to now be charged an assessment fee, even at $2 an acre for our field ground that has not a drop of water on it other than a divot in the ground that fills with water when it rains. And I can't control that, but I already pay the state because of that water puddles. People in town don't pay for the puddles on their front lawns. They're not assessed a fee. That water recharges the aquifer. Any water that lands on non-irrigated property contributes positively to our basin. It doesn't, it's not a negative impact. There should be a waiver for non-irrigated lands. You are included in the basin in the GSA, but that should be taken into consideration. It's a positive input for our aquifer, not a negative, because it's not being developed. It's not being, the water under it being, pumped out. Our hill ground, we couldn't farm it if we wanted to. Cattle ground. That's the only thing it's good for. That's what it's been good for. We managed it for generations so that it is a productive piece of land. That's our view, not the state, not the bureaucrats. It's our view, our home, our money.
You were the steward of your own land.
Pardon me?
You were the good steward of your own land.
Yes,
Yeah.
and if you're not, you don't farm or ranch very long. You go out of business.
You're not even getting paid $1,000 a
pardon me.
And you're not even getting
No.
paid.
And I don't want a fallow, because then that means I couldn't put my cattle on it. But I'm not contributing to the water use. My irrigated home place uses only surface water. Only surface water. The only wells on the property are domestic wells for personal home use. The rest of the property is irrigated. It's irrigated with surface water that I pay for. Didn't have to pay for it until, the volumetric charges came into effect, because that was our asset. Our property was used as collateral to build dams and to build the waterways that bring the water down from the mountains to our property in the valley. I own that system, not the state, not the feds, but me as a landowner own that. It's like going to the gas station, you fill a jug of, an empty jug for the gas station. You fill it up, you pay for the jug, you pay to put the fuel in that jug. You take it back to your house, and put it in your tractor or your lawnmower or your car. The state is, or the, whatever agency it is now going to charge me to put it into use. That's what's happening, to be charged multiple times for a asset that already belongs to me. Doesn't belong to the state, doesn't belong to anybody else, it belongs to me. And someone else has got their hand in my pocket and trying to go out. Talk about making an ag wasteland by the state continuing to do what it's doing with GSA. It's going to force this state into a wasteland. One of the other things I wanted to bring up, just from listening, is all the development of houses on the farmland, say on Modesto or Turlock or Denier. Just driving up here, I haven't come the way I've seen in many years. I think it's added to there. Big new housing developments. On 1 acre of ground, there's probably 5 homes. How much water does each home use per year on that 1 acre? You figured that out. And then how much was used to irrigate a crop on that 1 acre for the last 150 years? And I'm not saying that it should be urban against ag at all. There's going to be development. But what assessments are being put on those folks? It can't be just the city assessing. Each landowner, whether you are an ag landowner or an urban landowner, should be participating in this so that it's not on the back of only agriculture. It's unfair, it's unconstitutional, it's against everything that this country was built on. You guys are working for us. It's appreciated. I know there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into bureaucracy of trying to comply with this. I understand. I don't want to have to do it. If you have to listen to the concerns of those of us that have issues that need to be addressed and considered when setting up a fee structure that's going to affect us. I just quickly did a little math, how much more I have to come up when that's implemented for my go round and the home place. And it's $10,000. My ranch doesn't make an additional $10,000. It makes what it makes. It can't make anymore. What frustrates me also is large corporate farmers come in, they're investment companies. They're investors from Canada that come in and buy up dry field ground that was never intended to be farmed. Spent 2 years ripping the ground, plant trees on ground that should never
have been disturbed. Disturb all the wildlife, where's all the environmentalists? Where are the people that say they are protecting our wildlife and our open spaces? Nowhere to be found. They've got the money to fight, we don't, and when you have somebody like that as a neighbor, you can't fight them. They have surface water available to them, but because it's inconvenient to be on a rotation with everybody else, they pump it, and they have 8 huge wells this big around. 2 of the domestic wells on my property went dry. Never had a problem until they started pumping. Half the trees are dying because they're on rocky ground, but they don't care. They can write it off. They're not living on the land. They're not part of the community. It's an investment for people in another country. Those are things that not only us as members of this community, but you working for us need to be aware of. Our supervisors need to be aware of. I went to them before they approved those big wells. They said, we don't have any law in the books. I said, that's what you're here for. You're the ones that are the legislators. You're the ones making the laws for our county. Stop it or monitor it. So if you're gonna do any assessments, somebody that pumps groundwater, when they have access to surface water, you ought to find the hell out of it.
Thank you. No, I'm glad, I'm glad you said all the things you did. Appreciate it. Are there anybody else in the audience that would like to? Yes, Mr. Avila?
I've heard a lot, I really haven't heard any solutions. There's only one solution. You have to pump per acre that you own times the recharge, which varies in where you go. And then the balance of water that we need should be surface water. Now, the government is in charge of doing highways, providing water that we need. So I have not heard one word, which I understand is not the point here, but I would like to mention, I have not heard anything about supplying water to the people, which is government's job. And this will be surprising to everyone. That Congress in 1897, the Organic Management Act, which established the Forest Service, was for 2 purposes: a constant supply of lumber, and you know how good they're doing now, like you're referring it up, and then a constant supply of water. And then let's see, which, by the way, everything I have said is backed by law, not opinion, right? So, 1978. United States versus New Mexico, the Supreme Court said that water coming out of the mountains is not for, and I will repeat, the water coming out of the mountains is not for recreation, aesthetics, or fish. And we comply to let water go down the river for what? Fish. Mandated by who? And by the way, mandates are not law, so we don't have to comply to mandates, but the state says that they want the water for the fish, which is unconstitutional because Congress said that the water is not fish for fish, and the Supreme Court has backed that up in 1978. So people, learn your rights. You need, yes, I don't know, probably there's not one person here, excuse me, not a person, in law, person means a corporation, so I apologize for that reference. Now, there's not one man or woman here that is not against environmental protection. I don't think anybody here wants to pump the water to us. Come on, that's stupid. And I'm sure there's no one here that's stupid. But the problem with stupid is, and Einstein said, asked the famous question, what's the difference between genius and stupidity? And his answer to that question is that genius has its limit. And I see in government, I've worked with a lot of governments all over the world, but I see in government ineptness. I see people that are absolutely stupid, and you can't fix stupid. I apologize for getting feel emotional, but what are we going to do to supply water so we stop pumping groundwater?
So we do have, various different projects that are in the planning stages, and it's probably beyond the scope here to go into it. We're working with Turlock Irrigation District. We're working on other plans to maximize our water resources. Some of these are, for example, water rights on the Tuolumne River, on the Merced River are not something that we can just grasp. So we have to work with other partners like TID and MID to try to maximize. We're talking about the Groundwater Sustainability Agency does not have access to those water rights. So we work through agencies that do have the water rights, that do have the means to manage them. And so us bringing in more supply is an important part of our strategy. And, we can talk more about that, if folks are interested. I just wanted to offer, if you haven't signed in with your contact information, please give us your contact information. Please contact us if you want further information, if you want to talk further. We do want to spend time with you to make sure that we answer your questions and that we hear you. I apologize for not being better organized with a slide deck today. I mean, to me, this was really valuable time. I'm just sorry that I didn't value your time more and bring that projector. That's a huge regret.
If you consider, like she said, a waiver for a non-irrigated, has anybody considered that?
So we've considered a number of different things, and we'll be having further conversations. The things that we've considered are, is the amount that we're assessing the correct amount? That's something we can re-examine. We are adopting an appeals process that allows land to be moved from the irrigated to the non-irrigated roles. We could look at potentially expanding that appeals process. We have also looked at what incentives can we give and recognition can we give for non-irrigated landowners that implement practices that benefit the subbasin, because it's in our interest to promote those kinds of practices that help the aquifer. So those are the things that we've discussed. And part of the reason that we wanted to engage with you here today is we want to continue those discussions. And, as we move toward, the 25th, the things are still, they're not locked in. We can consider, what we're going to do in terms of our engineer's report that we propose for adoption.
But I would like to reiterate, I mean, we really do appreciate your attendance and your sharing of your positions and concerns, because I know the board members that are here, I sit on the TAC with other members that are here, that's what influences how we go about doing this. And so I think all of your comments are completely valid and beneficial to our ongoing discussion. So thank you. And Mike is sincere, and you can reach out to any of us. We're happy to talk about it further. And honestly, we're trying to come up with the best solution for the situation that we're all in.
So let me just maybe give you a phone number real quick if you want to call me, and I can route you to other resources. 916-200-9038. That's my cell phone number. There's been a lot of other information. Okay, one more time. 916-200-9038. And then the newsletter here is frequently asked questions and plans and local groundwater management. That does have the numbers for Karen Whip. That's our board secretary, and it has the website for Turlock Groundwater, where you can get to the reports, the documents, all the meeting minutes, all the presentations that we've made at various different workshops. So if you're interested, if you feel free to explore that or call me, and we'll walk you through where to find the information that you want, so that, you know, you feel like you're making an informed decision, you know, if you know what you want.
And just real quickly. So, it'll be on that Turlock website that's listed there. We will post the recording of this meeting.
Running landowner and you're we complain about $17.
Oh.
That's a little high. I can't see making an extra $17. She can make that extra $2.
I know it wasn't said tonight, but the budget projections for operations, we did that projection over 8 years and we're taking an average of that. It's $1.7 million plus. And so this assessment is based on that budget amount. We hope it's less too. But if we are to implement everything the state's requiring, I know. I'm sorry to say that is what it is at the moment.
Any other questions or comments for the, I mean, feel free to talk to us afterwards or contact us. Are there any other questions at this point or comments?
Great, thank you all very much. Eat something on the way out.